The sound of my mother's china hitting the hardwood floor echoed through the house. "This is our home," she screamed, her face red with rage. "We're your parents. You can't throw us out." I remained seated at the dining table, calmly sipping my coffee while watching the scene unfold. At 35, I'd spent the last decade of my life supporting my parents, paying their bills, and providing them with a roof over their heads. Yet here they were, trying to claim ownership of everything I'd worked for. My name is Alexander Foster, and this story begins 10 years ago when my parents lost everything in what they claimed was a bad investment. Being the dutiful son with a successful career in architectural engineering, I stepped in to help. I bought this beautiful Victorian house, moved them in with me, and even renovated it to their tastes. "You ungrateful child." My father joined in, his voice thundering through the dining room. "After everything we've done for you." I pulled out a folder from my briefcase. "Everything you've done for me," I repeated softly. "Let's talk about that." "We raised you," Mom interjected, grabbing another piece of china threateningly. "Put the plate down, Mom," I said firmly. "That set costs more than your monthly Social Security check." She froze, plate still in hand. My father stepped forward, attempting to use his height to intimidate me, a tactic that had worked when I was younger, but now seemed almost comical. "Don't you dare speak to your mother that way," he growled. I opened the folder and started laying out documents on the table. "Let's review the last 10 years, shall we? When you lost your house, who bought this one? When you couldn't pay your medical bills, who covered them? When you needed a new car, who provided it?" "That's what family does," Mom shouted, finally setting down the plate. "Family?" I laughed without humor. "Is that what you call taking advantage of your child for a decade while contributing nothing? Is that what you call trying to claim ownership of a house you haven't paid a single penny toward?" The catalyst for this confrontation had occurred earlier that day when I overheard them on the phone with my aunt, bragging about their beautiful Victorian home and how they were planning to sell it to fund their retirement. They hadn't known I was home early from work. "We're your parents," Dad said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "This is our home by right. You owe us everything you have." I pulled out the property deed and laid it on top of the pile. "Actually, let's talk about rights. This house, purchased by me. The renovations, paid for by me. The utilities, property taxes, insurance, all me." My mother's face contorted. "We let you live here with us." "Let me?" I stood up slowly. "You let me live in my house." I reached for another document, a spreadsheet I'd been maintaining for years. "In the past decade, I've spent $687,000 on this house and your living expenses. That includes the down payment, mortgage payments, your medical bills, car payments, credit card debt I paid off, and daily expenses." They stared at the numbers, momentarily silenced. "You know what hurts the most?" I continued. "Not the money, not the sacrifice of my own dreams to support you. It's that you've never once shown gratitude. Instead, you've criticized my choices, interfered with my relationships, and now you're trying to steal my property." "We're not stealing anything," Dad protested. "We're your parents. Everything you have belongs to the family." I pulled out one final document, a notice I had prepared by my lawyer. "No, it doesn't. And here's proof of ownership, along with a formal notice giving you 60 days to either start paying market rate rent or find alternative accommodation." The color drained from both their faces. "You wouldn't dare," Mom whispered. "I would and I am," I replied. "I've already spoken to Aunt Sarah. She's willing to rent you her guest house at a reasonable rate. Or you can stay here and pay $2,800 monthly rent, starting next month." "We can't afford that," Dad exploded. "I know," I said quietly. "Just like you couldn't afford anything else for the past 10 years. The difference is, I'm done enabling this behavior." Mom sank into a chair, tears starting to fall. "How can you do this to us? We're your parents." "Yes, you are. And as my parents, you should have taught me about responsibility, gratitude, and respect. Instead, you taught me that no good deed goes unpunished and that family can be the first to take advantage of you." I gathered the documents back into my folder, leaving only the formal notice on the table. "You have 60 days to decide. Stay and pay rent, move to Aunt Sarah's, or figure out another solution. But your days of taking advantage of me are over." As I walked toward my home office, I heard my mother's sobs and my father's angry muttering. Part of me felt guilty, They were still my parents after all. But a larger part felt relieved. 10 years of pent-up frustration and resentment were finally being addressed. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up my emails. There was one from my lawyer confirming everything was in order, and another from Aunt Sarah expressing her support for my decision. She'd witnessed their behavior over the years and had been urging me to take action. Now came the hard part, standing firm in my decision despite the emotional manipulation that was sure to follow. But as I looked at the property deed bearing my name, I knew I was doing the right thing. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even with family. Especially with family. The next 2 weeks were psychological warfare. My parents cycled through every manipulation tactic in their arsenal. Guilt tripping, silent treatment, fake health scares, and finally, bringing in the extended family. I was working in my home office when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found my Uncle Mike, Aunt Patricia, and 3 of my cousins standing there with concerned expressions. "Alex, we need to talk about what you're doing to your parents," Uncle Mike said, trying to push past me into the house. I blocked the entrance. "No, what we need to talk about is why you're interfering in something that doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern us." Aunt Patricia's voice rose. "Their family. Your mother hasn't stopped crying for days." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and showed them my account. "See this? I've spent nearly $700,000 supporting them. How much have any of you contributed?" The silence was deafening. "That's what I thought," I said. "When they lost everything, none of you stepped up. When they needed medical care, you were mysteriously unavailable. But now that I'm setting boundaries, suddenly you're all family advocates." My cousin Tom, always the reasonable one, spoke up. "Alex, we understand you've done a lot, but they're getting older. Where will they go?" "They have options," I replied. "They can stay here and pay rent or move to Aunt Sarah's guest house. I'm not throwing them onto the street. They can't afford rent." Aunt Patricia protested. "Funny how that's my problem and not yours," I responded. "Would you like to contribute to their rent? Or maybe offer them your spare room?" More silence. That evening, after the unwanted family intervention, I found my mother in the kitchen, making my favorite lasagna, another manipulation tactic. "I thought you weren't speaking to me," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm still your mother," she sniffed, "even if you've forgotten what that means." I walked to the fridge and pulled out a thick envelope. "Speaking of forgetting things, remember when I asked to borrow $5,000 for college? You and Dad said you couldn't help because you needed a luxury cruise instead." She stiffened. "Or how about when I got that scholarship and you told everyone you paid for my education? Or when I got my first job and you immediately asked me to buy you a new car?" "That was different," she whispered. "We're your parents. You're supposed to take care of us." "No," I said firmly. "You were supposed to take care of me, prepare me for life, not treat me like your personal ATM." The lasagna lay forgotten as she turned to face me. "We gave you life. We raised you. And I've repaid that debt 10 times over," I replied. "But it's never enough, is it? You'll keep taking until there's nothing left." My father chose that moment to enter the kitchen. "Still trying to justify your cruelty," he spat. I pulled out another document. This one was different from the others. "Remember the investment that supposedly ruined you? I hired a private investigator." Their faces paled. "Turns out there was no bad investment. You spent your retirement fund on luxury items, cruises, and gambling. You lied to me, used me, and now you're trying to steal my house." We were going to pay you back," Mom stammered. "With what money?" I asked. "The money from selling my house?" Dad slumped into a chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to take responsibility for once in your lives," I said. "I want you to acknowledge what you've done and make a real plan for your future that doesn't involve taking advantage of me." "And if we don't?" Mom challenged, but her voice wavered. I pulled out one final document. "Then I'll share these findings with the entire family. Everyone will know the truth about the bad investment, including how you've been secretly selling the antiques I bought for the house on eBay." "Yes, I knew about that too." The investigator had been thorough. "You wouldn't," she gasped. "Try me," I replied. "You have 45 days left to decide. Choose wisely." As I left the kitchen, I heard my father's broken whisper to my mother. "Maybe we went too far." In my office, I looked at the family photo on my desk. taken years ago when I still believed in their love being unconditional. Now I understood that their love came with a hefty price tag, one I was no longer willing to pay. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Sarah. "Stay strong, nephew. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most necessary ones." She was right. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about breaking a cycle of emotional and financial abuse that had gone on far too long. The smell of lasagna wafted up from the kitchen, but for the first time, its aroma brought no comfort. Like my parents' love, it was just another tool of manipulation, and I was finally immune to its effects. As the deadline approached, a remarkable transformation began to unfold. It started with small changes, my father quietly cleaning the garage, my mother actually doing her own laundry instead of waiting for me to handle it. But the real breakthrough came on day 40. I was reviewing blueprints for a new project when my parents knocked on my office door. They looked different, humbled, perhaps even ashamed. "Can we talk?" my father asked, his usual commanding tone absent. I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. They sat down, and for a moment, nobody spoke. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," my mother began, clutching an envelope. "And we found these." She handed me the envelope. Inside were old photographs. Me at graduation, standing alone while they were on another cruise. My first architecture award ceremony, which they'd skipped for a casino weekend. The day I bought this house, where they'd smile for photos, then immediately started redecorating without asking. "We were terrible parents," my father said quietly, "not just recently, but for a long time." I remained silent, waiting. "We've called Aunt Sarah," my mother continued. "We're going to take her up on the guest house offer. She's charging us $800 a month, which we can manage with our Social Security if we're careful. And we started selling our personal items," my father added. "The golf clubs, your mother's designer bags, my Rolex. We want to pay you back, even if it takes years." I leaned back in my chair, studying them. "What brought this on?" "Your cousin Tom showed us something," my mother said. "He calculated how much we'd taken from you over the years, including compound interest. When we saw the number," she trailed off, tears forming. "Over $1 million, my father finished. "When you factor in the house value, the renovations, the medical bills, everything. We've stolen your future." For the first time in years, I saw genuine remorse in their eyes. "We also called the financial advisor," my mother added. "She's helping us create a budget and retirement plan that doesn't involve taking advantage of you." I picked up one of the photographs, my college graduation. Do you know what hurt the most? Not the money. It was standing alone at every important moment of my life because you had better things to do. They flinched. "We can't change the past," my father said, his voice rough with emotion. "But we want to try to do better, if you'll let us." I opened my drawer and pulled up 2 documents. I had my lawyer draft these. One is a repayment agreement, modest monthly payments over 10 years. The other is a relationship agreement. "A relationship agreement?" my mother asked. "Professional boundaries, personal boundaries, and expectations for our future relationship, including therapy, both individual and family sessions." They looked at the documents for a long time. "We'll sign," my father said finally. "But not because we have to, because we want to make things right." "Even the therapy part?" I asked, knowing how my father felt about counseling. He nodded. "Especially that part." 3 months later, the change was dramatic. My parents had settled into Aunt Sarah's guest house, keeping it immaculate and even helping with her garden. They'd stuck to their payment schedule, sending small but consistent amounts each month. Most importantly, they'd attended every therapy session. During one family dinner at my house, now a calm, pleasant affair, my mother brought out a surprise. "We found this in storage," she said, handing me a dusty folder. Inside were my childhood drawings, architectural sketches I'd made as a kid, dreams of buildings I wanted to design. "We should have encouraged this more," she said softly. "Instead of pushing you to support our lifestyle, we should have supported your dreams." "It's not too late," I replied. "I'm still designing buildings." "We know," my father said. We drove by your new project downtown. The community center. It's beautiful, son." For the first time in years, their praise felt genuine rather than manipulative. Later that evening, as they prepared to leave, to their own home, respecting my space, my father turned to me. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" for not giving up on us completely, for giving us a chance to make things right, for being a better person than we taught you to be. I watched them drive away, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The past couldn't be erased, but perhaps it could be rebuilt like one of my architectural projects, taking damaged foundations and creating something stronger, more stable. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Left something on your desk. In my office, I found a new photograph in a simple frame. It showed the three of us at my latest project's groundbreaking ceremony, an event they'd actually attended, sober and supportive. Below it was a note. Building a better future, one day at a time. Love, Mom and Dad. For the first time in years, those words felt real. Sometimes tough love and firm boundaries don't end relationships, they save them. And sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most meaningful victories. He's just being dramatic. My mother-in-law's dismissive laugh crackled through the phone. Besides, Sophia's runway debut is a once-in-a-lifetime event. I couldn't miss it for a simple fever. I gripped my phone tighter, trying to process what I was hearing while sitting in my hospital gown, minutes away from being wheeled into surgery. Margaret, you were supposed to watch Oliver. He's sick with a 102-degree fever. I trusted you. Oh, please, Natalie, she interrupted, the sounds of excitement and camera shutters in the background. He's 6, not a baby. I left him plenty of snacks, and his iPad is charged. Sophia needs her mother here for her big moment. My name is Natalie Weber, and at 32, I never imagined I'd be dealing with this nightmare scenario. I was about to have emergency gallbladder surgery, and my mother-in-law had just abandoned my sick child to attend her daughter's fashion show. The nurses are coming, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. We'll discuss this later. I hung up before she could respond and immediately dialed my neighbor, Emma. Please pick up, I whispered as the call connected. Natalie? Aren't you supposed to be in surgery? Emma's warm voice answered on the third ring. Emma, I need help. Oliver is alone at home. My mother-in-law left him to go to a fashion show. He's sick with a fever, and I'm about to go into surgery. Could you please? I'm already putting my shoes on, she cut in, her tone shifting from concerned to determined. I'll get him and bring him to my place. Don't worry about anything except getting better. Tears of relief streamed down my face. Thank you. The spare key is under the turtle planter, I remember. Now focus on yourself. Oliver will be safe with me. As I ended the call, the nurses arrived to prep me for surgery. My mind raced with thoughts of Oliver, alone and sick in our house. James, my husband, was away on a business trip in Seattle, unreachable during a crucial presentation. I had no choice but to ask Margaret for help when the gallbladder attack hit. All prepped for surgery, the nurse asked, checking my vitals. Your blood pressure's a bit high. My mother-in-law just left my 6-year-old home alone to attend her daughter's fashion show, I said, wiping away angry tears. The nurse's hands stilled on my chart. She did what? She exchanged shocked looks with her colleague. Do you need us to call someone? My neighbor's handling it, I assured her, though my heart was still pounding. She's getting him right now. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Got him. He's safe with me. Fever's down to 100. Rest easy and get better. We'll handle everything else later. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. Oliver was safe. Now I could deal with the surgery, and after that, I would handle Margaret. The anesthesiologist began his countdown, and as consciousness slipped away, I made a silent promise to myself. This was the last time Margaret would ever have a chance to hurt my family. 4 hours later, I awoke in the recovery room to find several missed calls from Margaret. No voicemails, no texts apologizing for abandoning my sick child. Just missed calls that had probably been made to defend her actions or minimize what she'd done. There was also a text from James. Just saw Emma's message. What happened? Called Mom, but she's not picking up. I'm booking the next flight home. Emma had sent me hourly updates about Oliver, complete with photos of him resting on her couch, watching movies with her kids, and finally falling asleep after his fever broke. She was an angel, the kind of person who restored your faith in humanity just when others were destroying it. I thought back to when I first met Margaret, how she'd seemed so warm and welcoming. But that facade had cracked soon after James and I married. Every decision I made was wrong. Every boundary I set was controlling, and her daughter Sophia could do no wrong. Sophia, my 23-year-old sister-in-law, was Margaret's pride and joy. A wannabe model who'd never held a real job, she lived at home and spent Margaret's money on designer clothes and professionally shot Instagram photos. Today's fashion show was for a local boutique, hardly the Milan runway. But Margaret had been treating it like the event of the century. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Margaret. This time, I picked up. "Finally," she exclaimed. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. You'll never believe it, but Sophia got offered a contract with." "Did you check on Oliver?" I interrupted, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube but firm. "Oh, he's fine," she dismissed. "I told you he was just being dramatic. But listen, Sophia." "Margaret," I cut in again, stronger this time. "You left my 6-year-old child alone while he was running a fever of 102. He could have gotten worse. He could have needed emergency care. Anything could have happened." "Don't be so dramatic, Natalie," she scoffed. "You're starting to sound like Oliver. He gets that from you, you know. James was never such a needy child." My hand tightened around the phone. "Margaret, what you did wasn't just irresponsible. It was negligent. It was dangerous. And it will never happen again." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means we're done. You will never be left alone with Oliver again. Ever." She gasped. "You can't do that. I'm his grandmother. I have rights." "You lost those rights the moment you decided Sophia's local fashion show was more important than Oliver's safety. I have to go now. The nurse is here." It wasn't true. No nurse had arrived. But I couldn't stomach another moment of her excuses. I hung up and blocked her number, then closed my eyes, exhausted but certain I'd made the right decision. A text from James popped up. "Got on earlier flight. Landing in 3 hours. We need to talk about Mom." Yes, I thought, we certainly did. And this time, things would be different. This time, I wouldn't back down. James arrived at the hospital looking exhausted, his suit wrinkled from the rushed flight. His face was etched with worry as he entered my room. "How could she do this?" he asked, sinking into the chair beside my bed. "I've been trying to wrap my head around it the whole flight, but I just can't understand." Before I could respond, my phone lit up with a text from Emma. "Heads up, your MIL just showed up at my house demanding to see Oliver. I told her to leave or I'd call the police. She's heading your way." I showed James the message, watching his expression darken. "She's completely lost it," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. As if on cue, Margaret burst into the room, Sophia trailing behind her with a sulky expression. "This is ridiculous," Margaret announced, waving her hands dramatically. "Emma wouldn't let me see my grandson, and she threatened to call the police on me." "Good," James said, standing to face his mother. "Because what you did was practically criminal." Margaret's face reddened. "Oh, not you too. I expected this hysteria from Natalie, but you're my son. You know I would never hurt Oliver." "But you did hurt him, Mom," James shot back. "He was sick and scared, and you left him alone to go to a fashion show." "A fashion show?" He turned to Sophia. "And you were okay with this?" Sophia shrugged, not looking up from her phone. "Mom said he was fine. Besides, this was my big break. I just got offered a contract with—" "I don't care if you got offered a contract with the Queen of England," James interrupted. "Nothing justifies leaving a sick child alone." "Oh, please," Margaret scoffed. "When you were 6, I left you alone all the time, and you turned out fine." The room fell silent. James stared at his mother, something shifting in his expression. "Is that supposed to make this better?" he asked quietly, "admitting you neglected me too." Margaret's face fell. "I didn't. That's not what I—" "Get out," I said, my voice firm despite my post-surgery weakness. "Both of you. Now." "But my contract—" Sophia started. "Out?" James shouted, making both women jump. After they left, James slumped back in his chair, looking defeated. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I knew Mom could be difficult, but I never thought—" "It's not your fault," I assured him, reaching for his hand. "But we need to make some changes. Real ones, not just temporary boundaries she'll trample over in a week." He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I know, and I support whatever you think is best. Oliver's safety comes first." Just then, Emma sent another update. "Oliver's fever is completely gone. He's playing Mario Kart with my kids and asking when he can see his mom and dad. I showed James the message, watching him smile despite everything. Emma's been amazing through all this, he said. Unlike my own family. She's what real family should be, I agreed. Speaking of which, we need to talk about Christmas. James groaned. Mom's already been planning it. She's invited half the neighborhood to show off Sophia's modeling photos. Well, she can show them to whoever she wants, but we won't be there. I think it's time we started our own traditions. Before James could respond, my phone buzzed with a series of texts from Margaret. This is all being blown out of proportion. I demand to see my grandson. Sophia is devastated that you've ruined her big moment. James, call me immediately. Your wife is turning you against your own family. I handed the phone to James, watching his jaw clench as he read the messages. Without a word, he blocked his mother's number on my phone, then did the same on his. Enough, he said firmly. She can't keep doing this to us. To Oliver. A knock at the door interrupted us. It was my doctor with my discharge papers. As she reviewed my post-surgery care instructions, I caught James typing on his phone. What are you doing? I asked after the doctor left. Emailing our lawyer, he replied, not looking up. I want to know our options for a restraining order, just in case. And I'm documenting everything that happened today. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was the support I needed. A husband who put our son's safety above his mother's feelings. Later that evening, as we drove to Emma's to pick up Oliver, James turned to me at a red light. You know Mom's going to tell everyone we're horrible people for cutting her off. She'll play the victim, and Sophia will help her. Let them, I said, surprising myself with how little I cared. Anyone who believes abandoning a sick child is okay isn't someone we need in our lives anyway. The light turned green, and as James accelerated, I felt stronger than I had in years. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show you who people really are, and who you really are. Margaret had shown her true colors, but I found my strength. And I knew, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, that this was just the beginning of our story. The hard part wasn't over. But for the first time, I was ready for whatever came next. 1 month after the incident, we were still dealing with the aftershocks of Margaret's actions. As predicted, she launched a full-scale campaign to paint herself as the victim, flooding social media with tearful posts about ungrateful children and grandparents' rights. What she didn't expect was Emma's response. I've been quiet long enough, Emma announced one morning, showing me her phone. She posted the complete story on our neighborhood Facebook group, the same one where Margaret had been spreading her lies. Emma included screenshots of texts showing the timeline. Margaret abandoning Oliver, my emergency surgery, and her later attempts to minimize what she'd done. The community's reaction was swift and decisive. Margaret's carefully crafted image as the doting grandmother crumbled overnight. How dare she leave a sick child alone? I'm removing her as president of the garden club. And she had the nerve to play victim. Margaret's response was predictable. She showed up at our door, mascara running down her face. You've ruined everything, she screamed. The garden club was my life. And now Sophia's modeling contract is in jeopardy because the boutique owner saw the posts. James, who'd been working from home since the incident, appeared behind me. You ruined everything yourself, Mom. The truth was bound to come out eventually. The truth? She scoffed. The truth is you've both turned my grandson against me. Sophia's career is destroyed, and it's all your fault. No, I said firmly. Oliver isn't turned against you. He's protected from you. There's a difference. Protected? He needs his grandmother. He needs adults he can trust. James countered. You lost that trust when you left him alone and sick to attend a fashion show. It wasn't just a fashion show. Sophia appeared behind Margaret, her face red with anger. It was my big break, and now everyone's canceled my contracts because they don't want the drama. I felt a strange calm as I looked at them both. The mother-daughter duo who'd caused so much pain yet still couldn't see beyond themselves. Actions have consequences, I said simply. You're both experiencing that now. This isn't over, Margaret threatened. I'll sue for grandparents' rights. James stepped forward. Actually, it is over. Our lawyer sent you cease and desist papers this morning. Check your mail. As they stormed off, I turned to James. You really sent those papers? He nodded. After what Emma told me this morning, I had to. What did Emma tell you? Apparently, Mom tried to pick Oliver up from school yesterday. Told the office she was his grandmother and had permission. Thankfully, Emma was there volunteering and stopped it. My blood ran cold. Margaret had tried to take Oliver without our knowledge. Everything we'd done to protect him had been justified. 2 weeks later, we sat in our lawyer's office, reviewing the restraining order we'd filed. Margaret's attempts to take Oliver from school had backfired spectacularly. The school's security footage provided clear evidence of her escalating behavior. The order's been granted, our lawyer confirmed. She can't come within 500 feet of Oliver or attempt to contact him. Any violation will result in immediate legal action. That evening, as we sat on our back patio watching Oliver play with Emma's kids, I felt the last piece of tension leave my body. The sound of children's laughter filled the air, and the setting sun cast a warm glow over our small but genuine family. "I got an interesting call today," James said, sipping his coffee. "Dad finally reached out." My heart skipped. James's father, divorced from Margaret for 20 years, had been notably quiet throughout this ordeal. What did he say? He apologized. Said he should have warned us years ago about Mom's behavior. Apparently, she did similar things when I was young. He just didn't have the courage to stop her then. I watched Oliver chase fireflies with his friends, his laughter pure and untainted by adult drama. Well, we had the courage. That's what matters. James squeezed my hand. You know what else Dad said? He'd like to meet Oliver, properly this time, without Margaret's influence. I smiled. I like that. Life has a way of showing you who people really are, sometimes in ways you never expected. Margaret's true colors were revealed not just to us, but to everyone who mattered. And in losing her, we gained something more valuable. Peace, security, and the knowledge that we'd done the right thing for our son. Emma joined us on the patio, bringing a plate of cookies for the kids. Best decision we ever made, she said, nodding toward the playing children. Choosing our own family. She was right. Family isn't just about blood. It's about trust, respect, and putting children's needs first. Margaret never understood that, but we did. And in the end, that made all the difference. As the fireflies danced and the children played, I knew we'd written our own happy ending. Not the one Margaret would have chosen, but the one Oliver deserved. And really, that's all that ever mattered. It's just a quick shopping trip, Linda said, waving dismissively as she grabbed her designer purse from the passenger seat. The kids are sleeping anyway, and I'll only be 20 minutes tops. I watched through the rearview mirror as my twin toddlers, Emma and Nathan, napped peacefully in their car seats, completely unaware of their grandmother's casual disregard for their safety. My name is Madison Cooper, and at 32, I never imagined I'd be standing in a mall parking lot, arguing with my mother-in-law about basic childcare. The July heat was already intense at 11 a.m., and despite the covered parking spot, I could feel sweat beading on my forehead. Linda, you can't leave them in the car, I said firmly, reaching for the back door. I'll wake them up and take them with me to my appointment. We can reschedule your shopping trip. She rolled her eyes the same way she'd been doing since I married her precious son James 5 years ago. Don't be dramatic, Madison. The car's in the shade, and the windows are cracked. Besides, moving them now will just ruin their nap schedule. You're always going on about their precious schedule. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was the dental office confirming I was on my way. I was already running late for my root canal, a procedure I'd been putting off for weeks. Linda had insisted she could watch the kids, and James had assured me his mother was more than capable. Look, Linda continued, adjusting her expensive silk blouse. I raised James just fine, and he survived. You modern mothers are so overprotective. It's suffocating. I hesitated, my hand still on the car door. The dentist had been clear. They'd have to reschedule if I was late, and the pain in my tooth was becoming unbearable. Linda had watched the twins before, though never for more than an hour and always at our house. 20 minutes? I confirmed, hating myself for even considering it. Maximum, she promised, already turning toward the mall entrance. I just need to pick up a few things. The sales associate is holding them for me. I should have known better. I should have trusted my instincts. But between the throbbing pain in my jaw and Linda's dismissive confidence, I made a decision that would haunt me forever. I'll be done in about 2 hours, I called after her. Call me if they wake up, and I'll have James come get them. She waved without turning around, her heels clicking against the pavement as she disappeared through the glass doors. 2 hours later, I emerged from the dentist's office, my mouth numb and my mind foggy from the procedure. I had 6 missed calls, none from Linda. Instead, they were all from an unknown number. As I listened to the first voicemail, my blood ran cold. "Mrs. Cooper, this is Officer Martinez with the local PD. We need you to come to the Oakbrook Mall immediately regarding your children. I've never driven so fast in my life." The entire way there, my mind raced with horrible possibilities. Why hadn't Linda called? Where were my babies? The July heat had only intensified, and even with the windows cracked. When I arrived, there were 2 police cars and an ambulance in the parking lot. My legs nearly gave out when I saw them. But then I heard a familiar cry. Emma's cry. They were alive. Officer Martinez met me before I could reach the ambulance. "Your children are okay," he said quickly, clearly recognizing the panic on my face. "Overheated and distressed, but okay. The paramedics are checking them now." "How?" I started, but he was already leading me toward a security officer holding a tablet. "We need you to see this footage," Officer Martinez said grimly. "Your mother-in-law left the children in the car at 11:15 a.m. Security cameras show her entering multiple stores, trying on clothes, having lunch at the cafe." I watched in horror as the timestamp on the footage kept advancing. Linda, browsing leisurely through racks of clothes. Linda, sipping wine at the cafe. Linda, getting a manicure at the nail salon. All while my babies were locked in a hot car. A parking attendant noticed the children at 1:45 p.m. Officer Martinez continued. They were crying and clearly in distress. The temperature inside the car had reached dangerous levels, even with the windows cracked. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. "Where is Linda?" "Still getting her nails done when we found her," the security officer said, his disgust evident. She seemed genuinely surprised we were making such a big deal about it. That's when I saw her, being escorted out of the mall by another officer, her fresh manicure gleaming, shopping bags in hand, looking more annoyed than concerned. Our eyes met, and she had the audacity to look offended. "Madison," she called out, "tell them they're overreacting. The children are fine." I checked on them, eventually. I turned away from her, rushing toward the ambulance where a paramedic was holding Nathan. Emma was sitting on the bumper, drinking water, her face red and tear-stained. When they saw me, they both started crying again, reaching for me with desperate arms. As I held them close, breathing in their overheated but alive scent, I heard Linda's voice behind me. "This is ridiculous." I raised James, and he turned out just fine. I turned to face her, my voice deadly calm despite the rage coursing through me. "Officer Martinez," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I want to press charges." The look of shock on Linda's face would have been satisfying if I wasn't so focused on my children. As the officer began reading her rights, I heard her protest growing more hysterical. "You can't be serious. We're family. James will never allow this." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was focused on my babies, on their rapid heartbeats slowly steadying against my chest, on the miracle that someone had found them in time. Linda had no idea what was coming, but she was about to learn that some lines you can't uncross. And this was just the beginning. "You're being ridiculous, Madison," James shouted, pacing our living room later that night. "She's my mother. You can't seriously be pressing charges." I sat on the couch, watching my twins finally sleep peacefully in their playpen beside me. The pediatrician had cleared them but advised monitoring them closely for the next 24 hours. Every time I looked at them, I remembered the paramedic's words. 20 more minutes in that car. "Your mother left our children to die so she could go shopping," I said, keeping my voice low to avoid waking them. "She didn't check on them for almost 3 hours, James. 3 hours in a hot car. She made a mistake." He ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident on his face. "But she's family. We don't press charges against family." "A mistake?" I stood up, anger finally breaking through my calm exterior. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. A mistake is being 10 minutes late. She abandoned our babies in a hot car to get a manicure." James's phone buzzed again, probably his sister Vanessa, who'd been calling nonstop since Linda was released on bail. The family had closed ranks around her immediately, painting me as the villain who was tearing the family apart. The police showed me the security footage. I continued pulling out my phone. Want to see your mother browsing designer handbags while our children could have been dying? Or maybe the footage of her having wine at lunch. She even posted selfies from the nail salon. James looked away, but I pressed on. The parking attendant said they were soaked with sweat, screaming. Emma was trying to climb out of her car seat. Nathan had vomited. Do you understand how close we came to losing them? Mom's devastated, James said weakly. She's been crying all evening. She said she lost track of time. Lost track of time. I laughed bitterly. She told the police they were overreacting. She didn't even apologize, James. She was more worried about her interrupted manicure than our children. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Kate, a lawyer who'd been helping me navigate the legal aspects of the situation. The prosecutor wants to meet tomorrow morning, I told him. They're taking this very seriously. Child endangerment, criminal negligence. If you do this, James said, his voice hard, if you send my mother to jail, I'll never forgive you. I looked at him for a long moment, this man I'd loved for 7 years, who was now choosing his mother's comfort over his children's safety. If I don't do this, I replied quietly, I'll never forgive myself. The next few days were a blur of police statements, meetings with prosecutors, and endless calls from James's family. Linda had already started spinning her version of events, claiming she checked on the kids regularly and that I was exaggerating the situation to hurt her. But the security footage didn't lie. Neither did the temperature readings from inside the car or the medical reports from the paramedics. The prosecutor, a mother herself, was particularly interested in Linda's social media posts from that day, cheerful selfies with captions about treating herself, while my children were suffering in her car. This case is pretty straightforward, Kate told me over coffee, reviewing the documentation. The evidence is overwhelming, and her lack of remorse makes it worse. She's likely looking at serious charges. James is barely speaking to me, I admitted, stirring my untouched coffee. His whole family thinks I'm a monster for not dropping the charges. Kate reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're protecting your children. If James can't understand that, maybe he needs to reevaluate his priorities. That evening, I arrived home to find Linda sitting in my living room. James stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. We need to talk, he said. No, I replied, my voice firm. She's not supposed to be here. The bail conditions. Madison, please, Linda interrupted, her eyes red from crying. I'm sorry, okay. I made a terrible mistake, but surely we can handle this as a family. Think about what this will do to James, to everyone. Think about family? I felt eerily calm as I pulled out my phone. Like you thought about family while you were shopping, while you were getting your nails done. I'll pay for therapy, she offered desperately. I'll take parenting classes, whatever you want. Just drop the charges. I looked at James, seeing the hope in his eyes, his desperate desire to sweep this under the rug like every other time his mother had crossed the line. But all I could see were my babies in that hot car, scared and alone, while their grandmother sipped wine and tried on clothes. Officer Martinez, I said into my phone, Linda Cooper is at my house, in violation of her bail conditions. Madison, no. James moved toward me, but I stepped back. You have 30 seconds to leave, I told Linda, or you'll be arrested again. And James, if you ever let her near our children again, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. I watched them leave, Linda's tears turning to anger as she realized her manipulation had failed. James wouldn't look at me as he followed her out. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew without a doubt that I was doing the right thing. My children's safety was more important than family loyalty, and if James couldn't understand that, well, I had some decisions to make about our future too. The courthouse was packed the morning of Linda's hearing. James's entire family had shown up to support her, shooting me dirty looks as I walked in with Kate by my side. James sat with them, avoiding my eyes. 3 months had passed since that day at the mall. James and I were separated now, his choice, after I refused to drop the charges. He'd moved in with his sister Vanessa, claiming he needed space to think. That space apparently included dating his high school sweetheart, according to his recent social media posts. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Peterson entered the courtroom. I sat up straight, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Linda stood at the defendant's table, dressed conservatively in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She'd spent the past months playing the role of the devastated grandmother, giving tearful interviews to anyone who would listen about how I was destroying her family. But the prosecution had been thorough. They played the security footage, showing Linda's casual disregard for my children's safety. They presented the medical reports, the temperature readings from the car, and the social media posts that showed her complete lack of concern while my children were suffering. The parking attendant testified about finding Emma and Nathan, describing their distressed state in detail. The little girl was crying for her mommy, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The boy had thrown up all over himself. They were both red-faced and drenched in sweat. When it was Linda's turn to speak, she tried her usual tactics. "I made a terrible mistake," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I love my grandchildren. I would never intentionally harm them. I just lost track of time." Lost track of time? The prosecutor interrupted, holding up her phone. "Is that why you posted this selfie from the nail salon, Mrs. Cooper? Treating myself to some me time, just what the doctor ordered. That was 2 hours into your shopping spree while your grandchildren were trapped in a hot car." I watched Linda's face change as the prosecutor methodically dismantled her excuses. The security footage showed her walking past her car multiple times without checking on the children. Her credit card statements proved she'd visited 8 different stores. The nail salon receptionist testified that Linda had added a paraffin treatment to her manicure because she had plenty of time. Finally, Judge Peterson delivered her verdict. "Mrs. Cooper, your actions show a disturbing lack of regard for the safety of your grandchildren. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a prolonged series of choices that put 2 young lives at risk." Linda was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with an additional 3 years of probation. She would never be allowed unsupervised contact with my children again. As the bailiff led her away, she turned to glare at me. "I hope you're happy," she spat. "You've ruined everything." I stayed seated as the courtroom emptied, letting her words wash over me. James approached, looking uncertain. "Madison," he started, but I cut him off. "I filed for divorce this morning," I said quietly. "Kate has the papers." He stepped back, shock crossing his face. "What? Why now?" "Because I watched you sit there," I replied, standing to face him. "I watched you support your mother after what she did to our children. And I realized something. This isn't about her anymore. It's about what you're teaching our kids about love and safety and family." "I love our children," he protested weakly. "But you love your mother's approval more," I said. "And I won't let Emma and Nathan grow up thinking that's what love looks like." Later that evening, I sat on my back porch, watching the twins play in their kiddie pool. They'd recovered from their ordeal, though Emma still had nightmares sometimes. Nathan was more clingy than before, needing constant reassurance that I wouldn't leave him. Kate joined me, handing me a glass of wine. "You did the right thing," she said, seeing my expression, both with Linda and with James. "I know," I replied, smiling as Emma splashed her brother, their giggles filling the air. "It's just not how I imagined things would turn out." My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa, probably another angry tirade about family loyalty. I deleted it without reading it. The family had made their choice, rallying around Linda even after her conviction. But I'd made my choice too, and I wouldn't apologize for protecting my children. 6 months later, I received a letter from Linda's prison counselor. Linda had written a formal apology, acknowledging the full extent of her actions and their potential consequences. The counselor thought it might help with healing and closure. I filed the letter away without responding. Maybe someday, when the kids were older, I'd tell them about their grandmother, about that day at the mall, about why we don't see that side of the family anymore. But for now, we were building our own kind of family, one based on love, respect, and the understanding that real family protects each other, no matter what. Emma climbed into my lap, her hair still damp from the pool. "Love you, Mommy," she said, snuggling close. "Love you too, baby," I replied, holding her tight. "Always and forever." And in that moment, I knew without a doubt that every hard decision, every painful consequence had been worth it, because my children were safe, and that was all that mattered. Stared at my phone in disbelief as the security app notification lit up my screen. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m., and the footage showed my mother-in-law, Sandra, and sister-in-law, Melissa, practically skipping out my front door, dressed in their concert outfits, leaving my 12-year-old daughter, Emma, alone with 6 children under the age of 7. "They'll be fine," I heard Sandra's voice through the camera's audio. "Emma's so mature for her age. Stop worrying and let's go. I'm not missing the opening act." "My name is Olivia Parker, And I'm a pediatric nurse who works nights at the local children's hospital. Tonight was supposed to be my first shift back after a week off, and Sandra had volunteered to watch Emma and my 5-year-old son, Lucas. What I didn't expect was for her to invite Melissa over with her 4 kids, plus her friend's young daughter, and then decide to abandon them all for a surprise concert. I immediately called Emma. My heart raced as I waited for her to pick up. "Mom?" Her voice was tight with anxiety. "I don't know what to do. Aunt Melissa's twins won't stop fighting, and Lucy keeps crying for her mom." I could hear the chaos in the background, screaming, crying, and what sounded like something crashing to the floor. Emma was trying to sound brave, but I could tell she was overwhelmed. "Listen to me carefully, sweetheart," I said, already grabbing my keys and rushing to my supervisor's office. "I'm coming home right now. Just keep everyone in the living room, okay? Put on a movie if you can." "But Grandma said they'll be back in an hour," Emma protested weakly. She said I was old enough to handle it. My blood boiled at Sandra's manipulation. She'd always been critical of my overprotective parenting, constantly comparing Emma to how she'd raised Melissa. When Melissa was 12, she was practically running the household. Was her favorite refrain, conveniently forgetting the therapy Melissa needed later in life. "This isn't your responsibility," I assured Emma. "They had no right to put you in this position." Thankfully, my supervisor, Beth, understood the emergency. 20 minutes later, I burst through my front door to find absolute chaos. Emma was trying to separate Melissa's 6-year-old twins, who were pulling each other's hair. Lucas was hiding under the dining room table, hands over his ears. 4-year-old Lucy, Melissa's friend's daughter, was curled up in a corner, crying for her mother. And Melissa's youngest, 3-year-old Jack, had somehow gotten into the art supplies and was gleefully painting the walls. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Emma said, tears finally spilling over. I tried to stop him, but then the twins started fighting and Lucy wouldn't stop crying. I pulled her into a tight hug. "You have nothing to apologize for. This is not your fault." As I surveyed the damage while calling the other children's parents, my security app pinged again. Sandra and Melissa were posting Instagram stories from the concert, champagne glasses in hand, captioning them, "Much needed girls' night." #no regrets. Lucy's mother arrived first, furious after hearing what had happened. "They left my daughter with a 12-year-old. Without even asking me." She was already on the phone with her husband, who I knew was a family law attorney. By the time Sandra and Melissa stumbled through the door at midnight, giggling and still filming for social media, they found me sitting calmly at the kitchen table. The other children had been picked up by their parents, and Emma was asleep in her room, finally relaxed after I'd assured her multiple times that she'd done nothing wrong. "Oh, lighten up." Sandra rolled her eyes at my expression. "The kids are fine, aren't they? Emma needs to learn responsibility." "Responsibility?" I stood up slowly. "You mean like being responsible for the safety of 7 children? Or being responsible enough to ask parents' permission before abandoning their kids? That kind of responsibility?" Melissa snorted, still filming. "God, you're so dramatic. This is why Emma's going to grow up sheltered and afraid of everything." I smiled, and they both faltered slightly at my calm demeanor. "You know what's interesting?" I pulled out my phone. "I installed security cameras last week. I have footage of you leaving, footage of everything that happened while you were gone, and all your social media posts from tonight. I wonder what Child Protective Services would think about this situation." The color drained from their faces as the reality of what they'd done began to sink in. But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. They had no idea what I had planned for them, and by the time I was done, they'd regret ever putting my daughter in that position. The next morning, I received a barrage of texts from Sandra and Melissa, swinging between angry accusations and desperate apologies. "You're completely overreacting," Sandra wrote. "I raised 3 children. I know what I'm doing." Melissa was more direct. "Delete those videos now, or I swear you'll regret it." I ignored them both and focused on Emma, who was still shaken from the previous night. She sat at the breakfast table, pushing her cereal around without eating. "Am I in trouble?" she asked quietly. "Grandma said I should have been able to handle it." I set down my coffee and took her hand. "Listen to me carefully. What they did was wrong. Adults who care about you don't put you in dangerous situations or make you responsible for other people's children. They were supposed to protect you, not use you." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lucy's father, James Harrison, the attorney. Would you be willing to meet this morning? There are some things we need to discuss. An hour later, I sat in his office while he reviewed the security footage. His expression grew darker with each passing minute. This is beyond irresponsible, he said finally. They left 7 minors, the oldest being 12, without any adult supervision. They were drinking at the concert while responsible for children. They posted evidence of their negligence on social media, and based on the footage, this wasn't a sudden emergency, it was premeditated. What are my options? I asked. Well, he leaned forward. Several of the other parents are considering legal action. But there's something else you should know. Your mother-in-law has been posting about babysitting services on local Facebook groups. She's been charging parents to leave their children with your daughter while she supervises, except, based on the pattern we're seeing, she's not actually supervising. My blood ran cold. She's been what? He turned his computer screen to show me multiple posts from Sandra, advertising experienced childcare at reasonable rates. The comments were filled with local parents expressing interest. She's been using Emma as free labor, I realized, feeling sick, and profiting from it. Which is illegal, James confirmed. Child labor laws exist for a reason. When I returned home, I found Sandra waiting on my doorstep. Her earlier bravado had been replaced by nervous energy. Let's talk about this reasonably, she began, trying to take control of the situation. I know you're upset, but you're making a big deal out of nothing. Emma needs to learn. To be exploited? I interrupted. To be used as free childcare while you pocket the money. She paled. Who told you about that? Does it matter? What matters is that you've been endangering children and taking advantage of my daughter. It stops now. You can't prove anything, she said, but her voice wavered. I pulled out my phone and played one of the security clips. In it, Sandra was clearly heard telling Emma that she needed to earn her keep by watching the younger kids while she ran errands. I have months of footage, I said calmly. Every time you left her alone with other people's children. Every time you collected money from parents who thought they were paying for adult supervision. Every single incident. You're going to destroy this family, she hissed. Over what? A few babysitting jobs. Some harmless fun at a concert? No, I replied. You and Melissa destroyed the trust in this family when you decided my daughter was your personal babysitting service. When you left 7 children alone so you could go drinking. When you prioritized your social media presence over their safety. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. You have until tomorrow to contact every parent you've taken money from and return it. You will post a public apology on all the Facebook groups where you advertise your services. And you will never ever put Emma in that position again. And if I don't, she challenged, though her confidence was clearly shaken. I smiled. Then every parent gets the security footage. Every local mommy group sees how you really operate, and Child Protective Services gets a very interesting report about your child care practices. She left without another word. But I knew this wasn't over. Sandra and Melissa had always gotten away with their behavior through manipulation and gaslighting. They wouldn't give up control easily. But this time, I had evidence. This time, I had other parents on my side. And this time, I was ready to protect my daughter, no matter what it took. Sandra and Melissa's retaliation came swiftly. By evening, they had launched a smear campaign on social media, painting me as an unstable, controlling mother who was damaging Emma by being overprotective. Emma needs strong female role models, Sandra posted, alongside photos of herself with my daughter. Some people are too paranoid to let children grow and learn responsibility. What they didn't expect was for Lucy's mother, Sarah Harrison, to respond with the security footage from that night. The video of 7 unsupervised children, including a crying toddler and fighting twins. While Sandra and Melissa posted drunk selfies from the concert spread through local parenting groups like wildfire. The comments were brutal. Who leaves SEVN kids with a 12-year-old? I paid her to watch my kids last month. Was my 6-year-old actually being watched by a child? Someone needs to report this. Melissa tried damage control, claiming the video was taken out of context. But more parents came forward, sharing stories of times they paid Sandra for childcare, only to later discover their children had been left with Emma. My phone rang. It was my husband, Tom, who was away on a business trip. I just saw Mom's posts, he said, his voice tight with anger. And the video. Why didn't she tell me she was leaving the kids to go to a concert? Because she knew you'd say no, I replied, just like she never told you about using Emma as her personal babysitter for profit. There was a long pause. I'm coming home early. This ends now. The next morning, Sandra and Melissa showed up unannounced, barging in before I could close the door. You've ruined everything, Melissa shrieked, waving her phone. Do you know how many angry messages I'm getting? Parents are demanding refunds. That's what happens when you scam people, I said calmly. Actions have consequences. We didn't scam anyone, Sandra protested. Emma was perfectly capable. She's 12. I cut her off. She's a child, not your employee. And speaking of employment, how much money did you make from all those babysitting jobs? Because the labor board might be interested in that. They both went quiet. In the silence, we heard a car door slam. Tom walked in, his face stormy as he looked at his mother and sister. I've seen everything, he said quietly. The videos, the posts, the babysitting scheme. What were you thinking? Tommy, Sandra started, her voice switching to a wounded tone. Your wife is blowing this out of proportion. You know how dramatic she can be. Stop, Tom's voice was firm. I saw you leave my children alone. I saw you profit from putting my daughter in an impossible situation. No more manipulation, no more excuses. What do you want from us? Melissa asked, finally realizing the gravity of their situation. First, every parent gets refunded, I said. Every single one. Second, you post a public apology admitting what you did. Third, you stay away from Emma unless another adult is present. You can't keep us from seeing her, Sandra protested. Actually, we can, Tom replied, and we will, until you prove you can be trusted, which, right now, seems unlikely. After they left, Emma came downstairs. She'd been listening from her room. Are Grandma and Aunt Melissa going to hate me now? She asked quietly. Tom knelt beside her. No, sweetheart. They're angry because they got caught doing something wrong. None of this is your fault. 3 months later, things had changed dramatically. Sandra and Melissa's reputation in the community was shattered. Several parents had filed complaints about the unauthorized childcare operation, and they had to refund thousands of dollars in babysitting fees. More importantly, Emma was flourishing. Without the pressure of being Sandra's unpaid babysitter, she joined the school drama club and made new friends. She was acting like a 12-year-old should. Sandra still occasionally tried to guilt-trip us through flying monkeys, claiming we destroyed the family. But the security cameras stayed up and the boundaries stayed firm. You know what, Mom? Emma said one evening as we baked cookies together. I used to think I was bad at taking care of kids because I couldn't handle it like Grandma said I should. But now I know it wasn't my job to handle it at all. I hugged her tightly, grateful that she'd learned this lesson now rather than spending years thinking she wasn't good enough. Sometimes the hardest part of being a parent isn't protecting your children from strangers. It's protecting them from family members who think their love gives them the right to cause harm.